Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Mollie McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today is Michael J. Breus, PhD. He is a double board-certified clinical psychologist and clinical sleep specialist. He is one of only 168 psychologists in the world to have taken and passed the sleep medicine boards without going to medical school. And Dr. Breus is the author of many books, including The Power of When, which is a groundbreaking biohacking book proving that there is a perfect time to do everything based on your biological chronotype, early bird or night owl. Dr. Breus gives the reader the exact time to have sex, run a mile, eat a cheeseburger, buy, sell, ask your boss for a raise, and much more based on over 200 research studies. He is an expert resource for most major publications, doing more than 200 interviews per year. Oprah, Dr. Oz, The Doctors, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, etc. Dr. Breus has been in private practice for 23 years and recently relocated to and was named the top sleep doctor of Los Angeles by Reader's Digest. And most recently, he is just releasing right now a brand new book called Energize, Go From Dragging Ass to Kicking It in 30 Days. So be sure to check out that new book. And without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. All right, you all, I'm so excited to announce our new sponsor, Soul CBD. When I was at my lowest point dealing with my insomnia, CBD was one of the key compounds that I leaned into to combat my crippling anxiety, calm my nervous system, and support my journey to entrain my circadian rhythm. But of all the brands out there, where can you go that you can have a strong trust in their quality? Well, Soul CBD is completely THC-free, organically farmed, gluten-free, and third-party tested for toxins. Now, one of the things that is great about Soul is that they aim to help create rituals around your CBD use. And sleep and rituals are best friends. For instance, I love that Soul CBD supports a nighttime bath routine with their CBD bath bombs, which help to combat stress, soothe aching muscles with a mix of CBD essential oils and dead sea salts. Another ritual that we aim to cultivate in the realm of sleep optimization is circadian rhythm intermittent fasting, which is really all about eating your meals between sunrise and sunset. And Soul CBD has very popular gummies that can serve as a nighttime dessert or treat to look forward to without caving to ice cream. Nice alternative. My go-tos personally are their oils, capsules, topicals, and even CBD bath bombs. It's helpful for anyone who struggles with anxiety, pain, or sleep. Now, particularly when I'm traveling, I like to lean into as many things as possible to help with inflammation, and CBD does just that. Now, here's a really cool part. You get 15% off automatically and free shipping when you go to mysoul.com/sleep is a skill. I'm going to say that again. You get 15% off automatically. All you have to do is go to this link, which will be in the show notes, mysoulcbd.com/sleep is a skill. All right, let's get on to the show. And welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. I could not be more delighted to have our guest here today, Mr. Dr. Michael Breus. Thank you so much for taking the time on your busy schedule. Really, really appreciate it.
So happy to be here. I love your podcast. I love your newsletter. I'm excited that we're starting our new friendship together. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, that means the world to me. I shared with you when we spoke last that I still have your voice in your head from your Power of When book from Audible. And certainly so much of the tremendous amount of resources that you've put out over the years have just made a huge difference in my life. So really, really grateful.
It makes my heart feel good. Thank you.
Oh, good. Absolutely. So this is a really exciting moment for me to get to have you share your wisdom. So one of the things I'm really excited about for today is that we have really not touched on this topic of chronotypes on the podcast.
Yep.
And none other than yourself to help guide us how to understand this topic. So well, first, to begin at the very basics, if you want to share a little bit about how you even got into sleep, we can certainly touch on that. And then we'll also ask about the specifics of what are sleep chronotypes.
Absolutely. So people always wonder, like, did you have somebody in your family that had a sleep issue? I know you had struggled, your story of struggling for long periods of time with insomnia. People ask if I've had a sleep disorder, things like that. Honestly, I sleep great. Most people in my family sleep great. It wasn't that. It was kind of serendipitous. I don't know if I've ever told you about this before. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology. And at the end of the PhD, you do what's called a residency, somewhat similar to a medical residency. It's a 1-year program. And at the time, I was interested in sports psychology. I wanted to teach athletes how to throw harder and run faster and all those cool kind of things. But to be fair, the best program in the country was at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi, because my area of interest at the time was eating disorders in athletes, and they had an amazing, amazing program there. The problem was it was the best program in the country, so only the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons got to go there. I went to the University of Georgia, top 20 program, but wasn't Harvard. But what's interesting is that same program had a sleep track on it, and they were advertising for students to apply, and you could do a 6-month specialty in sleep. And I had worked my way through graduate school in the Department of Electrophysiology. So I know how to take apart an EKG machine, put it back together, and understand what all those signals are. Turns out they use the same machines. So I said to myself, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sell myself as the sleep guy. And then once I get there, I'm going to transfer because they can't stop me from transferring, right? Because just because you're not going to let me in through the front door doesn't mean I'm not going to be in your program. So, get used to me.
Persistence. Love it.
Absolutely. And so I went ahead and I applied and I got the sleep track. And of course, I raised my hand the first day and I said, I want to transfer. And they said, nope, you have to do the sleep track. You can do the second half of your residency over there. And I was like, okay. And honestly, by the third day, I absolutely fell in love with clinical sleep medicine. And I knew that was my path forever. Mollie, I help people like this. It's amazing. Unbelievable. When you're a clinical psychologist, and you're working with depression, anxiety, things of that nature, it can take weeks, months, sometimes even years before you see treatment gains. I mean, for some people, like I can literally help some people in 24 hours. Like it's amazing. And so that really grabbed me, that effect. And I just said, gosh, this is such a unique aspect of medicine. And to be honest with you, sleep is kind of cool. I mean, I'm kind of an old guy. I'm 53. I've been doing this for 22 years. And so back then, almost nobody was in sleep medicine, which was kind of an interesting path for me. Also, I'm a PhD, not an MD, right? And so the sleep disorders universe is really dominated by MDs. And so kind of another funny story, got my very first job. And they said, Michael, we're excited to have you. But at the end of the year, this is a 1-year contract. You need to take and pass the sleep medicine boards. And I raised my hand and I said, sir, that's a medical board and I'm a PhD. I don't know how that's possible. And they said the sleep medicine boards was called a rogue board. And so it was brand new and they were dying to get people to take it. And so they opened it up to PhDs, nurse practitioners, MDs, osteopaths for a 3-year period. And I took it on the 3rd year and passed, and then they closed the window. So I am one of 168 people in the world who have passed the medical boards without going to medical school.
What? Wow. What a background.
So that's me.
Well, uniquely suited, certainly, and have years and years behind you. So for you to be speaking to us today on this topic of particularly how we can, not even just the big topic of sleep, because I know you have so much information there. So, maybe we can do some partnership in the future to dive into that topic. But for the chronotypes topic, I know you've just really helped guide people on this and help to understand the various different ways that there's that bioindividuality for people. So what are sleep chronotypes and what can we really learn from them?
Yeah. Well, so it was interesting. So being a sleep researcher and a sleep practitioner, I've known what chronotypes are. I mean, let's be honest, everybody knows what a chronotype is. If you've ever been called an early bird or a night
Yes.
owl, those are chronotypes.
Yeah.
But to tell you the story of how I got so interested in it, so for everybody out there, Mollie referenced it earlier, my book, The Power of When.
Yes.
That was really the very first book that really dove into chronotypical behavior, circadian rhythmicity, and things like that. So for me, it was an interesting kind of walk into it. And I'll tell you how it happened. I had a patient who I failed on. I mean, I flat out failed. This is an insomnia patient, which, by the way, is my specialty. I kind of use the PhD side and the MD stuff together to really be able to give a more holistic approach to insomnia, because I'm not a big fan of drugs. And she came in and everything I tried didn't work. And we tried drugs and it didn't work. And she came back and she was so defeated. And I said, look, come back in. We're just going to dig in. I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm just going to keep going until I figure you out. And she said something to me that really sparked an interest in me. And she said, Dr. Breus, I feel like I'm living in the wrong time zone. Like, what do you mean? She was like, we were on the East Coast. And she said, if I lived in California, my life would be awesome because everybody gets to sleep in later and things like that. And I said, well, if you could have your druthers, what would you do? And she said, I'd go to bed at 1, I'd wake up at 9, and I'd be at work by 10. And I said, okay, why don't you do that? And she said, well, number one, I have a husband and kids, and they get up at a very much earlier hour, and I have a job. And I said, oh, well, do you think you could change your work hours? And she said, unfortunately, my work hours are going to change because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get fired by the end of this week. She said, I keep falling asleep in meetings. My work product is terrible. So I said, hey, can I call your boss? She said, sure. So I called her boss and I explained who I was and what I wanted to do. And I said, can she come in at 10:30 and leave at 6:30 instead? He said, I don't care what she does. I'm firing her at the end of the week. And I was like, no pressure. Right? Great. Just what I needed. Right. And so we worked the schedule and I called him on Friday and it was amazing. He turned to me and he said, I got 3 more employees I want you to talk to.
What?
He said her work product is through the roof. She's participating in meetings. She's like, I don't know what's going on, but this works. And so when we got back in and we started to look at it, it turns out that she's a wolf chronotype or an extreme night owl. So that's how I started to get into it. And then I just dove deep into the literature. And it turns out, chronotypes have been around since the 70s. There's been a questionnaire called the Morningness Eveningness Questionnaire, or the MEQ, that's been around in research for quite a while. Like I said, the 70s. This girl didn't fit well into it, right? I mean, she could be a wolf or she could be an extreme wolf. And then I started looking back at some of my patients and saying, I've got a lot of patients who don't fall into either one of these 3 things. And when you delve in, it turns out this is genetic. So I can go to your 23andMe data or your ancestry.com data, and I can actually find where the single nucleotide polymorphism, or what's called a SNP, where the building blocks were flipped. And that's what happens in a very particular area called the PER3 gene. That's what happens. And so I was like, okay, well, this seems pretty easy to identify. Why aren't people following their chronotypes? And you start to see that life doesn't work on chronotypical behavior except for one of the chronotypes. Early birds are not in the realm, and night owls, don't like the 9 to 5. And I started realizing that there were a lot of things out there. And that's when I started to try to identify, could there be a 4th chronotype? So at the time when I was doing my research, we knew about early birds. We knew about what were called hummingbirds. Those are people kind of in the middle. And then we knew about night owls. But I was like, damn, I got a lot of insomnia patients. And I don't think they fit in. I mean, this one story I told you was definitely an extreme night owl, but I got a lot of other ones that don't fit that. They're higher anxiety. They have difficulty sleep. All these different things are going on. So I started to look at the genetics, and lo and behold, there is a genetic abnormality that is identified quite easily. It's more popular than you would imagine for this 4th chronotype. So what I ended up doing was taking the original 3 and adding a 4th. So what I'd like to do for your listeners now is go through the 4 of them, if that's okay, and help people identify which ones they are. And just so that you don't just listen and kind of guess which one you are. If you want, you can go to www.chronoquiz.com. That's my quiz. And we've had almost 1.5 million people now go through the quiz. And we've got great statistics. We're starting to really understand what's going on. So early birds are replaced by lions. That's just a term that I'm using. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When you're sitting in a marketing meeting for your book and you're trying to figure out what to call each one of these 4 avatars, basically, that you've created, I decided I wanted to use an animal model, and I wanted to use animals that actually participated in the correct chronotype. Here's the big problem. Nobody wants to be a porcupine. Nobody wants to be a platypus,
animal.
right?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So I had to find cool animals that were also chronotypically accurate. And so lions turn out to do their first kill before dawn. They are early birds, if you will. And so also, who doesn't want to be a lion, right?
Right.
What we've learned is there are certain personality characteristics. Besides these people like to go to bed early and wake up at like 5:30, these have a tendency to be my COOs of a company. These are the operators. They have a tendency to make a list every day and go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. Very militant in their thinking, but they get a lot of stuff done. These are kind of the alphas, if you will, of that kind of universe. And again, genetically speaking, this is one of the things that we see with them. The next category, which were hummingbirds, I call them bears. So nothing wrong with being a bear, teddy bear, grizzly bear, something like that works out well. And bears are the best. Oh, by the way, the early birds, there's only about 15% of the population actually identify as an early bird. Many people force themselves to be early birds, and we'll talk about why that's not a great idea in just a minute. Bears make up 50%. Like 1 in 2 people is a bear. I got to be honest with you, Molly, I wish I was a bear. Being a bear is the best. Our whole society is built on a bear schedule, right? The 9 to 5 works perfect for a bear. They go to bed around 10:30, 11 o'clock. They get up around 7:30. Like it really works well for them. The third category, rather, the evening type or night owl, I call them wolves. I'm a wolf. I'm just letting you know I am a night owl. I always have been, and I probably always will be. And what's interesting about that is wolves are very, very different than the other 2 chronotypes, specifically from a personality standpoint. My wolves are my actors, my authors, my musicians, my creative types are because, when you talk to people who are creative, they ain't waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Usually it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they've got inspiration to do this, that, or the other, right? And that's kind of an interesting group. They are also high risk takers. They also have a tendency to have more health problems than the other 2 chronotypes. So there's a lot of different things that kind of go on with that whole group. And then there are the dolphins, which are the insomniacs. Yes. And that's the 4th chronotype. And that's the one that I kind of helped bring into the vernacular. And what's interesting about them is they're a lot like the lions, but they got a lot of anxiety and they got a little bit of OCD. And so what happens is they're kind of vibrating at a super high level. And so what we have to do is work with them in particular to help lower that anxiety, to make it more manageable so that they can actually produce and do the things that they want to do. So those are the 4 chronotypes that I've identified. And through our research, we've been able to back it up with statistics.
Wow. So much to unpack there. And tremendous that so many people have taken this test. So definitely, if you're listening, head right on over, take that test, find out where you're falling. And so from that place, they're taking the test, they get their results. Are there elements of like hybrids? Are there, I'm half this, half that? Yeah, please share.
So there are definitely hybrids, and it turns out that there are early bears and late bears, right? So when you're talking about a statistical group that represents 50% of your population, you got to figure there's going to be some ways to categorize them a little bit better. And so we do see that within the bear category, some people like to be a little bit earlier, some people like to be a little bit later. And we have actually found that there are some hybrids out there. There are some people that have forced themselves into a schedule, but found out that they are a different schedule later on. Also, it changes over time.
Yes, that was my next question.
Which is another thing that people can identify. And actually, you have actually probably been through almost all of the chronotypes.
Yes, absolutely.
Point, right? So when you're an itty bitty baby, you're a lion, right? Because itty bitty babies go to bed really early and wake up earlier. I don't know what your sleep schedule was like when you were an infant, but I'm taking a good guess here.
Yeah, good guess.
Then when you're a toddler, middle school range, you were a bear, right? You'd go to bed around 7, you get up at 7, that kind of thing. When you're a teenager, you're a wolf, right? I mean, think back to the day. What did you want to do when you were 14, 15, 16? You wanted to stay up until, 2 and sleep until 12 or whatever, right? Then what happens is once you kind of get out of college and you start to hit that 20, 22 age range, your chronotype seems to set, all right? And then you're locked and loaded for about 30 years. Then when you come to my age, I'm 53, you start to see that melatonin production begins to decline. And what that ends up doing is it moves your chronotype backwards. And so you ever notice how grandma and grandpa are eating dinner at 4:30? It's really not their fault. It's their chronotype that has now moved them to become much earlier. And this is a well-known biological phenomena that we see within circadian rhythmicity.
Wow, very interesting. What about this topic now? More and more people are starting to hear more about this topic of their relationship to the sun and their scheduling and all of
Oh,
this.
yeah.
How about the people that say, oh, well, that's just a set of behaviors and it's long held and it's habits? How do we make sense of that, of what is really ingrained or a genetic predisposition, and then what is behavioral in nature?
So the genetics are the genetics, right?
Yes.
Your body wants to wake up at a certain time and it wants to go to bed at a certain time. Also, all of your hormones are on that schedule as well. The reason that chronotypes become so powerful is it's not just about sleep, although clearly that's my bag. That's kind of what I like to talk to people about. That's your thing. Yeah. So that's why we're here. But knowing and understanding your chronotype becomes a relationship tool. You can learn the best times for intimacy between you and your partner. You can learn the best time to ask your boss for a raise because, again, relationships, understanding where people are. Because here's what happens. Let's say that you're an early bird and I'm a night owl, okay? Yeah. You wake up at 5:30 in the morning and your melatonin turns off, your adrenaline and cortisol turn on, and then your entire hormonal system kicks into gear and does a very predictable pathway, right? I'm the wolf. I wake up at 8 o'clock and that's when all of that happens for me. I'm like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 hours off, but I'm running the same pattern just later than you. You can kind of see why, from a relationship standpoint, this could get a little strange if you're not necessarily partnered with someone who is the identical chronotype. Turns out my wife is a wolf.
Hey.
and we didn't even know this at the time. When we were dating, I would say, what time do you want me to pick you up? She'd say, grab me at 8. We'd go have dinner from 8:30 to 10. We'd go to a movie from 10 to 12. Then we'd go out and get drinks or dessert and get home at 2. And that was no big deal. Like, we were wide awake. Like, that's just what we did. And we never really thought about it. I mean, I've talked to some women who are like, that would kill me,
Yes.
Like, Michael, there's no way I would have been able to do that. So from a relationship standpoint, it gets really, really interesting. Also, when you have a family, not everybody in the family is the same chronotype.
Right.
Which gets really interesting quickly. And depending upon those ages, like we were discussing before, there's some patterns that we can know. And so, as an example, one of the most important people in my life is my daughter. And if I walk in the room in the morning when I used to wake her up in high school and say, hey, Carson, it's time to get up, she'd be like, leave me alone. I'd say, well, what are you doing today? And she's like, right. But if I walked into her room at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when her wolfishness was on par and she was peaking, I'd sit there and talk with her for an hour, hour and a half. That's pretty important to me.
I love that you're leaning into this, really developing a strategy and an approach for people to really get that there is so much that we can glean from this topic of timing. And certainly your book, More Than Most, will go into how much of this can help empower ourselves in our lives and the types of relationships and types of conversations that we're having when we start to have more knowing for both ourselves and the people around us. So I think that's brilliant. And with that,
hold on. I didn't finish answering your question about light, because you were asking about light.
Thank you. Yes, that would be perfect.
And how it affects this. So light is the biggest circadian pacemaker that there is, right? Yes. And so we use light in order to help us fix people who have jet lag, as an example. And so when you get your light exposure, whatever time that is in the morning, that turns out to be arguably the most critical thing that you can do for your sleep, period, end of story. And let me explain why. So when you wake up in the morning and your peepers open up and you get some sunlight into your eyeballs, what happens is, and sunlight, by the way, not artificial light. We can talk about the differences there too.
Yes, please.
There are many. What's interesting about getting sunlight in is when sunlight hits your eyeball, you have a special cell in there called a melanopsin cell. And this sends a signal to your pineal gland to turn off your melatonin faucet in your brain. Remember, guys, melatonin is that key that starts the engine for sleep. It's not everything that you need, but you certainly can't sleep without melatonin. So you want to turn that off in the morning. And then that's the reason why you don't want to get blue light at night, because you want melatonin flowing. But there's a second thing that happens that very few people know about or talk about. When the melatonin faucet turns off, it immediately sets a timer in your head for when it should turn back on. And
Yes.
that's where the consistency is so, so critical. And so what happens with people is they say to me, well, Michael, I kept my wake up time consistent all week. I got up at 6:30 every day, and Saturday I slept until 9. Okay, well, then you can pretty much expect that you turned off your melatonin at 9 now, but you turned on your timer at 9, which is almost 2.5 hours later than it was. And so I got news for you. Sunday night, you ain't going to sleep. And it's really that simple. And so when you, and it turns out that light is the thing that you can use to manipulate your circadian rhythmicity or chronotype if you want. And so as an example, for people who are lions who like to wake up at 5:30, I mean, seriously, the only thing I hate worse than mornings are morning people. They're so freaking chipper all the time, right? There's no light, right? And so for people who do that, use a light box. You can use a commercially available light box. Also, if let's say it's winter time and you're in the Northeast, lots of cloud cover, so there's not a lot of sunlight around. I have a commercially available light. It's called the Go Light, GOLITE. I love it. I keep it in my travel bag because I travel a lot around the world. And so I can help reset my circadian rhythm based on my chronotype wherever I am. So light is a big factor. But here's another one that a lot of people don't know about: exercise. Exercise also can reset your circadian rhythm, and you can use exercise from a timing perspective to help with that as well.
Absolutely. And real quick, because I know you have lots of resources. So one, thank you for sharing about the Go Light. And two, I know you've worked with and are closely connected with Time Shifter, which I think certainly share a little bit real quick about that, how that can guide us on this light topic and what we can learn about that.
Absolutely. So Time Shifter is an app. So people, if you want to check it out, it's great. Full disclosure, I'm a partial owner and developer of said app, but it's really cool because it absolutely fixes jet lag, period, end of story. So what we do is we use light, melatonin, caffeine, and napping at a very particular algorithmic schedule based on where you are, your chronotype, and where you're going and the timing of your flight. We can give you a travel plan for 2 days before you travel, so that when you land on the time zone that you're landing in. Like your body is in that time zone. So let's say, you're going to a biohacker conference in Iceland, because I think they actually have them there, right?
Yes,
Reykjavik,
totally.
I think, is where they have them. Like that seems like a thing that you would probably do, not me, but
you know me well.
Yeah, I do. Then your timing is going to be way the frick off, right? Yeah. And so using something like this can be extremely helpful because you can land and perform. Right. And because that's the goal here, is to not let sleep be a hindrance or jet lag be a hindrance. And so Time Shifter does all the math for you.
I mean, and I'm happy you shared more about it, because it was so crucial for me after I had my period of insomnia. Once I actually did begin traveling again, and we traveled for 3 years after that fact. And so with that, it became so important to have this app. It just really helped take a lot of the guesswork out and brings about a new kind of verb, if you will, of time shifting. And really what that can look like, and bringing it into a bit more of the kind of modern vernacular. So it's fantastic. And real quick, they're looking at developing some elements for shift workers too, right?
Yeah. And so with the pandemic, people stopped traveling. And so we were like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
Right. So we were like, where else can we go? And there's 2 areas that we've actually started to develop. One, which is launching very quickly or might already be launched, is for shift work.
Great.
So if you're one of these people that works a third shift, the graveyard shift, the 7P to 7A, if you will, it's terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Very few people can handle that. You'd have to be an extreme wolf to even be comfortable in that universe.
Yeah.
And so what we've done is helped you with a sleep schedule so that you can adapt to your new work schedule, even if you don't have the wolf chronotype. The second area is actually interesting as well, and that's chronobiology. And so many people don't realize it, but let's say you have a blood draw at 8 o'clock in the morning for your thyroid. And let's say when you come back 6 months later, you do the same blood draw, because let's say your thyroid is of concern and you do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you could have wildly different values. And what does your doctor know about that? So now we're starting to try to influence people to timestamp that, and then start to understand where the differences are, or have some consistency across these blood draws. Also, we now know that there's a very interesting algorithm that can be used for chemotherapy, where we actually can administer chemotherapy during very particular times in the circadian cycle, use less chemo, and it's more effective.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were doing that with Time Shifter, and that's fantastic. That's amazing. So excited to hear more about that. I highly recommend anyone listening to download that app. They've got you can do a free kind of test run
Yep.
and give it a
Yeah,
shot.
I
Really
think if you
cool.
use the code Sleep Doctor, you get 2 free plans.
Oh, even better. All right, here we go. Definitely check that out. It's been really, really valuable. It kind of takes all the math and the guesswork out of it.
It's the guesswork out.
And now I know we're jumping a couple different topics, but wanted to check in on the dolphins. So it's likely that many people listening to something called the Sleep is a Skill podcast might be hanging out in dolphin territory.
Dolphin world, yes.
Yeah. Tell us more about this dolphin chronotype.
So, what's fascinating about the dolphins, and to be fair, I wrote the book for dolphins.
Yes.
That was really the group that I really wanted to try to educate and affect. And so, number one, you're not alone. So many of them think like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to sleep. What is wrong with me? I've got this level of anxiety, blah, blah, blah. There's 15% of the population would fall into this category. Now, remember, there's mild versus extreme. So there's lots of variation within there, but there's a lot of people who do this. And what we've discovered is it's really anxiety fueled, right?
Yes.
And when people think about anxiety, I think there are a lot of misconceptions here, right? People are like, anxiety, does that mean like I'm trembling, I'm a neurotic mess? No, that's not what it means at all, right? It could mean that when you walk into a room where there's more than 3 or 4 people, you feel a little funny. That's called social anxiety, right?
Yes.
It could mean that you have a phobia, like a fear of a particular thing, like clowns or spiders or what have you, right? All of these things are known anxiety types of triggers, but there's also this general low level of anxiety that a lot of people have. And here's the thing, when you get in bed, you can't turn off your brain. And that's the number one complaint that I hear from dolphins. Quite frankly, it's the number one complaint I hear from most insomniacs is, Dr. Breus, I just can't turn off my brain. And that's very characteristic of this dolphin chronotype. And again, it's fueled primarily from anxiety. The chronotype itself was interesting because when you started to look at the actual SNP and the genetics themselves, there is an actual variation that you can identify. So it's pretty interesting when we see some people do that. I will tell you one thing that has also happened, interestingly, when we've been working with the data, is we have had a group of people who identify as a dolphin. So they take the quiz, but when we look at their genetics, they're not dolphins. And then what we do is we help them with their sleep schedule, and then their true chronotype comes out.
Ah, very interesting.
And that's pretty cool when that kind of thing happens. And so for a lot of dolphins, once we get them on a schedule, so we have them getting up around 6:30, going to bed around 12:30. So they're getting about 6 hours of sleep. Hold on, Dr. Breus, what are you talking about 6 hours of sleep? Yes, 8 hours is a myth. Let's just be very clear about that, okay? Everybody has a different sleep need. That need, by the way, can change. It can change monthly for women with menstrual cycles. It can change throughout seasonally because of light exposure. It can change throughout your lifetime because of a whole host of things. And so that's kind of the area that I think people have started to think about when you're talking about dolphins and sort of what do they want to do? What do they not want to do? So once we lock and load them into that schedule, magic seems to happen because they're not worried about things anymore. And it's a light enough schedule where it's doable. But if you don't sleep well for 3 or 4 days, it builds up your sleep deprivation. And that's good because the more consistent you are and falling and going to bed at the right time and waking up at the right time, eventually you get so damn tired, you finally fall asleep.
Yes.
And that's when the magic happens.
Ah, really cool. And I think that can be calming to many a dolphin mindset. And I certainly, to your point, I've found myself having been on every single one of those chronotypes. And certainly in my period with insomnia, what felt like extreme dolphin type behavior. And so with that, I really, really appreciate you sharing that for people that might have those fears of how do they manage this and just to kind of begin to have that trust in their body's ability to pull for the sleep pressure and to eventually get that sleep that they need.
I was just going to say one last comment. It's fascinating. Most dolphins have a really difficult time with this one particular concept, which is I ask them to sleep less.
Yes.
That's really difficult for them. And it seems quite counterintuitive. So I just want to double tap really quickly on that one for just a second. When you have insomnia, what many people do is they say, I'm going to get in bed early in the hopes that I'm going to be able to fall asleep.
Yeah.
That's basically the worst idea you could possibly have, right? Because the way sleep works is it's a two functioning system. You've got sleep drive and you got sleep rhythm, okay? Sleep rhythm is not something that's going to change a whole lot. Sleep drive can change up and down fairly easily. So if you get in bed, so let's say that you're a wolf, right? And you get in bed at 9 o'clock because you don't have anything going on. You're certainly not going to fall asleep. Right? And if you do, it's going to be for 45 minutes. Then you're going to get up and you're going to be up for the rest of the night. So
Yes.
what we ask dolphins to do is to squunch. That's a technical term. Squunch their sleep schedule into about 6 hours to raise that sleep deprivation. So over the course of time, and it usually takes about 7 to 10 days, they will begin to fall asleep and actually start to stay asleep and not have those evening awakenings, which so many dolphins talk about. I fall asleep for 3 hours and I wake up and I'm done. And what the hell do I do? And I finally fall back asleep at 5:30 and my alarm goes off at 6:15 and those kind of things. That's why we push that schedule in. And so again, very counterintuitive, but it is very effective.
And so for people listening that they say, oh my goodness, I need to squunch and what have you, are there more guides that you have within your books or online
so
for
here's the great
details?
thing. If you go to chronoquiz.com and you take the quiz and you identify as a dolphin, I'm going to send you all that information. So I'll tell you when to go to bed, when to wake up. I'll even tell you when you should drink caffeine, when you should drink alcohol, when you should exercise, because those are all hormonally driven activities. And we want you to do those when your hormones are at the peak for that particular activity.
And to that point, real quick, for these different chronotypes, are there any absolutes where you say no to certain things, alcohol, caffeine, anything that we can bring in for kind of guides?
Absolutely. So for the dolphins in particular, no napping, period, end of story. If you do not sleep well at night, do not nap during the day. I don't care how tired you get, you'll pull from your sleep drive and make it much more difficult for you to sleep. So dolphins are never nappers. Okay. So we're very consistent about that one. For, I'm trying to think for the other ones where there's like big things. It's kind of individualized depending upon which chronotype you are. But when you look at alcohol, I actually teach you when is your chronotypical happy hour. So we all have one, right? So if you're a wolf like me, it's actually later. But if you're a lion, it might be earlier. So it's actually just about shifting the timing of when, hence the book name, The Power of When, you do things. And that's the best part. And so there's very few things that you can't do based on your chronotype, but you just got to do them at the right time.
Great. Okay. So one question I wanted to make sure we checked in on is for the people identifying as wolves and they've come out, they get their results, they're wolf. And then how do we deal with then how they're thinking about themselves, their kind of identity? And then are there times when then they can really take this and run with it and suddenly they're going to bed at like 4 and 5 and pushing the envelope? Where is too far?
So first of all, wolves have a tendency to have been given a very hard time for most of their lives, because they like to stay up late. They're terrible in the mornings. And wolves are the kids who are asleep in period 1 and 2 almost all the time. And a lot of people think wolves are lazy because, again, we're just not with it in the mornings. And people think a whole host of things about them. We see a lot more depression with wolves, but we see more anxiety with dolphins. So there's interesting mental health issues. Again, not every dolphin has anxiety and not every wolf has depression, but we do see a preponderance of those types of things there. And so when you're a wolf, here's the thing. It's very easy to engage your wolfishness, right? And say, well, if Dr. Breus says I shouldn't go to bed until 1, screw it, I'm going to bed at 2. That's a dumb idea. Okay. Like I give you these parameters because I've done all the hard work for you. Like I've read hundreds of research papers in this area. I have a pretty good feel for what we can do. Now, to be fair, my recommendations are general to the category of wolves. And like we were talking about to begin with, you can be a mild wolf to a severe wolf. So there's a little bit of play in there, but basically I also give you the total amount of sleep that each chronotype should probably shoot for. As an example, dolphins should shoot for 6 hours of solid sleep. Now, if I turn to you when you were in the middle of your dolphinness, right? And I said to you, what if I can give you a technique that can give you 6 hours of solid sleep? You'd have married me at that time, right? I mean, you'd just been like, let's go, whatever you have to say. I got $1 million, here you go, right? But it sounds like a small amount of sleep, right? But it's not, right? Because you're having such difficulty with sleeping. And so each of the chronotypes has a chronotypical total sleep time, and we give you that when you take the quiz.
Wow. So helpful. Well, since it's clear you have so much wisdom in this area and beyond. So I think people are going to really want to know, what are you doing with your sleep? Exactly. And what's coming? So,
Absolutely.
so the first question we have for every guest is about their own personal relationship to their sleep. So the first one is, what does your nightly sleep routine look like right now?
So my nightly sleep routine is interesting. And so I'm a wolf. What I do is I take the last hour before bed and I chop it up into 3 20-minute segments. I call this the power down hour for folks out there. So I take 20 minutes for just shit I gotta do. So, preparing for things the next day, writing the last email, that kind of thing. 20 minutes for hygiene. By the way, for people out there who wear makeup, one of the things that's very interesting is if you wait to that last 20 minutes to remove your makeup, you're doing it in front of a mirror with tremendous bright lights.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor, take your makeup off early in the evening so you don't get this massive dose of blue light in the beginning of that period of time. But 20 minutes for hygiene, and then 20 minutes for some form of meditation, relaxation, prayer. What I tell people all the time is you got to have runway to land the plane. Right?
Yeah.
Sleep is not an on-off switch. That's just not how it works. It's more like slowly pulling your foot off the gas and slowly putting your foot on the brake. There's a process that needs to occur there. And I would also tell you that for your listeners out there, if you fall asleep in under 5 minutes or before your head hits the pillow, that's a bad sign. Okay.
Yes.
That's a sign of sleep deprivation. I'll never forget. In 2004, I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show and I was talking with Oprah and she said, Stedman falls asleep in 1 minute and 37 seconds. And I was like, dude, that's bad.
I love that because that's often the response. Oh, that's not for me. I can't learn anything there. I'm good. And thank you, because that is very, very important call out.
So yeah, it's very interesting, when you start to kind of think through all of those things. So my routine is that power down hour. And so what I do is I kind of knock out what I got to do from a hygiene perspective. I do my thing. Also for some people, if you have issues with sleep, that might be a time for a shower or a hot bath. That can be helpful for some people as well. And then again, do your thing. For me, I like to read before bed. Oftentimes, I will wear my blue light blocking glasses. So, because that's helpful. These are ones that go over your reader, so I can look really goofy. Watch this. So,
the
so
fit overs.
Yeah,
yes.
This really proves how old I am. I have the big frames and I have the overlays, right? So, I mean, at this point, I might as well get Medicare or something. I don't know. Unbelievable. So that's what I kind of do. Now, I will tell you this. My wife doesn't follow any sleep hygiene rules. She has animals in the bed. We have 2 French bulldogs and a cat in our bed. We have a big screen TV on and in our room, and she cannot fall asleep without the TV on.
Actually, I'm curious to hear about that. So your thinking on that is that it's very much dependent. You can't just have those hard and fast rules then in that case. So love to hear your thoughts.
So I'll tell you my thoughts. When we first met, my wife said, hey, Michael, if we ever have a sleepover, then I need to let you know that I fall asleep with television on. And I said, oh, don't worry about that. I'm going to be a sleep doctor. I'll fix that. I don't know about anybody out there, but if you've ever tried to fix something in your partner, good freaking luck. Okay. Yeah. So I removed the TV from the bedroom and she said, great, you're no longer allowed in the bedroom. So I put the TV back in the bedroom and now I was allowed back in the bedroom. And so I decided to study her. And what I discovered is she wasn't really watching it. She was listening to it. Right. So her eyes are closed and she's kind of on her side and listening. And so I said to her, I said, like, why do you need it so much? And she said, Michael, I can't turn off my brain. She calls it monkey mind. And she said, if I've got an old episode of Seinfeld on, it's just enough of a distraction to slow my brain down. Right.
Yes.
And she's a little dolphin-esque. Let's be clear. She's a wolf, but she's got a little dolphin in her for sure. Yeah. And so this kind of helps with her. And let's be honest. 99% of the televisions have timers built into them these days. Just go set the freaking timer for 90 minutes to 2 hours and it'll turn off. And that's what we do.
Fantastic. I think there'll be a sigh of relief from a lot of listeners hearing that.
I'm giving everybody permission. It's okay to fall asleep with the TV on.
Fantastic. All right. Well, you just help a lot of people's nightly sleep routine. So appreciate that. Our second question then is, what would we see on your nightstand? And that could apply to apps or supplements or anything that might be relevant for us to know.
So I've got a lot of cool stuff. As you can imagine, people send me stuff just like they send you stuff all the time. And so we don't really call this the house. We call this the testing lab. Because we test stuff all the time. My kids test it. My wife tests it. We even have stuff for our animals. And so I've got a few things that are on my nightstand that I think people would find interesting. So One thing is you got to be able to breathe. People really take that for granted. And the level of congestion that a lot of people have could then cause them to open their mouths and be a mouth breather while they're sleeping. There's a lot of data to suggest that this is not a good idea. It's kind of like putting leaded gas in the tank, if you will. Your mouth is meant for eating. Your nose is meant for breathing because your nose has filters. It actually warms the air, humidifies the air before it goes down, as opposed to kind of coming back through. And also, sleep apnea is far more prevalent with people who've got congestion. So I actually have this crazy device. It's called a sinusonic.
Nice.
You may never have heard of it. So this was developed by a group of physicians. And what you do is you just breathe against it. So you ever been on an airplane and you pop your nose? Right? Yeah. What they discovered is if you push like that, popping your nose, and you hum at the same time, it actually does a few different things to lower congestion levels inside your sinuses. It gets a little technical, so I'm not going to get too technical on that part. But what I can tell you is I do this for 2 minutes before I go to bed, and I do it for 2 minutes before my breath work in the morning. And it's fantastic. I don't snore, which my wife is very happy about, and I sleep better and my mouth stays closed. So this is one of the things that's on my nightstand. It's called the sinusonic, and we can put the link in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If I drink alcohol and I do snore, I use one of these. It's called a mute.
Yes.
So mute is an internal nasal dilator. So what's cool about mute, and I've worked with this company before, is you pop it in, and in 30 seconds, you don't even realize that it's there. And what it does is since it's internal, it actually opens the nares. And my favorite part about this versus the overlay strips is number one, the oils on your skin will make that no longer effective. I mean, I've woken up where it's like across my eyeball and I'm like, pulling out, whatever. What's nice about this is this one, you can actually change the aperture of each one of them, because look at my nose. I don't have the same size nostrils.
Right.
Neither do you. Right.
Yeah,
So that's one of those things that it's an adjustability factor that becomes really, really important. So if I'm drinking whiskey, I'm using the mute.
That's fantastic. And I like it too, because it's a pretty easy thing to bring in. So often when we are drinking, we want minimal things to do to help improve our sleep. And so that's pretty doable, I think, for most people.
And what's good about this is I buy one and I throw it in my suitcase, because when you're traveling, you have a tendency to drink more alcohol, you're out more, you're at conferences, things like that. So that's another one. I did show you my blue light blocking glasses. That's another thing that is on my nightstand. Full disclosure, I make them. If you go to sleepdoctorglasses.com, you will find these. The reason that I made my own, quite frankly, I didn't like the other ones that were out there. There's a lot of them out there, and unfortunately, their science isn't as good. I know this because we actually did a head-to-head trial at the University of Arizona, and our glasses came out as actually number one.
Nice.
So it was a cool thing to have happen. So check them out, Sleep Doctor Glasses. We have the overlays and the regular ones and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the overlays can be great for a lot of people too. Fantastic.
I got two more things that I went upstairs and I grabbed all my stuff. So I thought it would be fun.
Yes.
So two more things that I have. One is my supplement. It's called Sleep Doctor PM. Great. And so if I do have problems sleeping, because I am a human and I can have problems sleeping as well, I have two different formulations that can be used. One is a beginning of the night formula, and one is actually a middle of the night formula.
Brilliant.
I'm the very first person to ever create a supplement to be taken in the middle of the night.
Love that.
Which surprising to me because it seems so obvious. So many people, and I mean, I think you may have experienced this yourself when going through your battle with insomnia, was maybe you can fall asleep okay, but 2 o'clock comes and you're screwed, right? Like, what do you do? Because you can't take melatonin, you can't take a sleeping pill, you can't take any of that stuff in the middle of the night, because then you're really screwed for the next day.
Yeah.
So the formula that I have has about half of the total ingredients that you would see for somebody taking in the beginning of the night with no melatonin in it. And we've really gotten an amazing response from people on that. So people can go to sleepdoctorpm.com and you can find it there. And then the final thing is, if I don't want to hear Seinfeld from my wife, I got these. They're the Bose Sleep Buds. So they're a little bit on the higher priced side, but they're actually these little earbuds, and you wear them while you sleep. So I got to be honest with you. And when Bose came to me and they're like, Michael, we want you to talk about these. And to be clear, I work with the company. I was like, are you kidding me? Why would I ever support something that you put in your ear and leave it there all night long? Like, could it do inner ear canal damage? What's going on here? Bose really did their homework, and they've created something that is incredibly comfortable, and they have a unique sound library, which I thought was great. So I worked with them to create music specific for sleep. So you can't pump in like your favorite podcast on these things. It's a very specific library. So this really is a sleep tool. And I love this for airplanes, long haul flights.
Ah, yes.
Perfect. Because, you got the sound, the noise, and if you can get a lay flat, you're good to go on this.
Ah, fantastic.
So that's what's on my nightstand.
Tips.
And of course, my new book.
Yes, exactly. I just got my copy, so very excited to dive in more. So absolutely. And real quick, we might as well just kind of dive into this one too, because this is your fourth book, I believe, right?
It is. Okay. It is my fourth book. Absolutely. So it's called Energize. So we've been talking a lot about chronotypes so far. Yeah. What we decided to do is we took the 4 chronotypes and we added the 3 body types. So you remember back to biology in high school, there was the endomorph, the mesomorph, and the ectomorph. So those are real things. It turns out those are based on metabolism. And so what we discovered was when we overlaid these, so we took 5,000 people who had taken the quiz, 5,000 dolphins, bears, lions, and wolves, and we had them do these body type quizzes. And we discovered there were chronotypes within chronotypes. So there were categories inside that helped us identify the right exercises. So what's really fascinating is as a wolf, if you ask me to go work out, it's not my favorite thing to do. So you have to give me exercises that I can do well and achieve my success goals to do. Otherwise, I'm probably not going to come back to do them. That exercise routine is specific to my chronotype and to my body type. So we actually have gone through and discovered all of these for people. So what the new book is called Energize, go from dragging ass to kicking it in 30 days. And you just
Great
got
title.
it. So
yes.
Thanks. So I can't wait to hear your experience with it for sure. But what we're doing is we're prescribing people a sleep schedule based on their chronotype, a movement schedule based on their body type, and then using intermittent fasting for their nutrition. To be honest with you, I couldn't tackle the topic of nutrition. It's humongous.
Yes.
And there's so many people who have so many different things. I just want you to know when to eat. And that's what intermittent fasting does. And so we actually use an intermittent fasting schedule based on your chronotype.
Great. Amazing. And I know there's so much to dive into on the topic of what you've put into this book. So I think people should absolutely know that we've only scratched the surface of some of what's in there. Just in my brief being able to take a look, there's tons of topics discussed in there. So absolutely get yourself a copy. And it's released on which date?
December 14th is when it comes out. And for folks out there, it's really about energy. And so we help define things like what is emotional energy? Like who are the energy vampires in your life, right? Who are the people that suck you dry, right? And then who are the people that inspire you to do more, right? And so we teach you how to identify those two people and then say, spend more time with the gainers, not with the drainers, right?
Love that.
I mean, right? I mean, that's how it is. We talk about things like non-sleep deep rest, where what is resting energy, right? Like it's important. Sleep is big and we're not talking about it, but rest is also a component that's important. Moving energy, just moving can be a very big, aspect to you. And we even talk about things like having music on that keeps you elevated and energized, sunlight exposure, nutrition. So, we look at all these different energy sources that help you identify based on your chronotype and based on your body type, what's the best.
Love that. And I think this can really be life-changing for people because it really helps us understand how to design our lives in a way that improves our results and actually has us be at the source of how we feel day in, day out. So it could not be underestimated, the impact that this could bring. And so in alignment with that, actually, one of the last things we want to make sure we get from you is what has made the biggest change for you with your sleep game or biggest aha moment with all the research you've done, with the 4th book coming out? What's changed the game for you?
Consistency.
Yes.
There's just no question about it. The more consistent you are, and I know it feels weird to be so militant about it, but the consistency that I run every single day allows me to have, I've had no caffeine today.
Yeah.
None. Okay. Like this is how I am all the time. And it's all based on movement schedule, sleep schedule, nutrition schedule. And it's just a nice way to kind of have your life and be able to reach the goals that you're looking for.
Could not agree more. I mean, it's just absolutely, it's one of the things that was so life-changing for me, getting up under some of these things that could make a difference in my sleep results. And then also, but by and large, my results with my life and feeling that sense of energy as you're speaking to day in, day out. It's just tremendous. So
Yeah, I'd say
fantastic.
there's one more thing that actually that you
Please.
made me think of is I spend about 35 to 40 minutes every morning meditating. And that's
Mm,
new for me. And while I know it's not necessarily sleep focused, what I
yeah.
can tell you is that when I wake up in the mornings, I don't know about you, Mal, but I'm like a shotgun. Like my thoughts are everywhere.
Yeah.
When I'm finished with my meditation, finished with my breath work, and done my exercise, I go from being a shotgun to being a sniper. Like I'm
Mm,
focused, I'm attacking, I know what I'm trying to do. So having a morning routine would probably, so consistency in my schedule is one,
yep.
but that morning routine is really very valuable.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness, so many gems. Is there anything that we missed in this conversation that you want to make sure you convey? Is there anything that we didn't touch on?
I don't think so, but what I would tell people is if you got questions about sleep, Mollie's a wonderful resource and her newsletter is amazing. If you want to come and check out thesleepdoctor.com sometimes, there's so much information there. You can
So
rabbit hole
much.
yourself for as much as you want. And there's some cool stuff. Like we do a lot of fun things. We do a lot of fun activations. So check it out. I'm also on social media. If you're a social media person, the handle is The Sleep Doctor on every platform. And then apparently I'm TikTok famous now. Did you know that?
Yes. So I heard about this.
It's
Fantastic.
ridiculous. So I'm doing these funky TikTok videos, just like sleep tips and facts. And
Yeah.
they're a lot of fun and people seem to like them. So check them out.
Keep them coming. That's fantastic. And absolutely check out Michael Breus's website because there's so much there. We've cited him a bunch of times in the newsletter as well. And just made me think real quick. One of the things that I love that you have lots of cool kind of new takes and new ways of thinking about certain things that can help our sleep. The one thing that came to mind was you call it the Nappuccino. Is that right?
The Napa
Yes.
latte.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
Napa
Napa
latte.
latte. That's what it is.
Yep.
Yes.
And actually I'm working with a company that's going to have a Napa latte product.
What?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So folks out there look for something called Nap Jitsu.
Yes. Okay.
It's coming
I'm
out and it's
excited.
going to be cool. So what this is where you do a dose of caffeine and then take a nap. With this company in particular, there's a nootropic that you get along with it. So it's really interesting and the science is good. And I've used the product myself and I love it.
Quite the biohacker. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay. Well, be sure to check out Michael Breus's website, his TikTok fame, the social media platforms, the new book coming out, Energize. And then beyond that, we're really grateful to be connected with Dr. Breus, looking forward to various ways of sharing his knowledge and all that he has to offer. So again, I thank you so much for taking the time and just really grateful for the work that you do.
No, thank you. And, everybody out there, Mollie is on the hunt for answers. She's the girl for it. She's going to dig them out and she's going to find them. So send in your questions, continue to participate, listen to these podcasts. They're really good.
Thank you, Dr. Breus. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well. Everybody out there, sweet dreams.
You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Mollie's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.